This piece is called Brittany's Euthanasia, and it was written after a prompt from Ian Kirkpatrick on our YouTube page, Kirkpatrick, and it was read on the 29th of December, but that's been edited and it's different now, and I wanted to read it because I'm about ready to publish it. I don't have time to wait for the results of the contests. This is going to be put in Comedy and Cringe on an ebook on Amazon in the next day or two. Brittany's Euthanasia. It was a beautiful day. The fall leaves had already dropped their load on the small mountain town of Ridgeford, Virginia, and now you could see the sunlight shining through the naked branches and twigs. I walked with my dog down a road in the part of town where I knew I could let him off leash. He began to trot, and when he rounded the bend too fast, I knew he'd seen something. I quickened my step to see what's up. Slightly out of breath after running an embarrassing 50 feet, I saw Carlos spread-legged and eyeing a groundhog that had, instead of running back into its hole like a normal groundhog, stood its ground against the barking dog. The groundhog swiped its paw at Carlos and hissed. I called my dog off. Carlos didn't come. Frustrated, I approached the melee, angry at my dog for not breaking off the other animal at my command, and went over to yank him away. Figuring the rodent was a threat to me and him both, and feeling my anger vibe, Carlos lunged out and nipped the groundhog's hide and tossed him away to the side against a clump of grass. The groundhog attacked again with another claw swipe. Carlos growled and crunched one of their eyeballs and chumped down on his groundhog face with a bite from the dog's jaw and tossed her away gently into a wadded pile of leaves. The male groundhog stood up and smirked, with one eyeball now dangling down her snout, and proceeded to charge at G instead of my dog. I kicked it away with my left foot. Carlos snarled and went over with a loud grrr and bent down and shook the groundhog ferociously from side to side. You could hear the bones crackling, and the groundhog squealed like a little bitch. I called my dog off, and this time Carlos came to my side. It was unnatural that the groundhog had attacked me, so I decided to do the right thing and call animal control, in case it was a case of rabies, even though the animal control officer never liked me because of Bob Barker platitudes and dog balls. Her name was Brittany Buenos Nostalgia. "Ridgeford Animal Control," she said in a baritone yet feminine foreign drawl. Yes, Then I explained to her what had happened as politely as I could, knowing full well the woman had once staked me and my dog out before in areas to attempt to enforce the local leash law. "Well, we need to find the animal and test it if we can, and we also need you to contact the health department. What is your name?" "Anonymous," I said outright. I knew I should have never called. Brittany began to fuss. Instead of remaining anonymous, I had to tell Brittany my real name. She might have slightly less than mall cop powers, but she had enough to sick a real police officer on me if she wanted to. "You can't be anonymous and derp, 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 derp," was all I heard once my mind became infected with her sour, preachy tone. I gritted my teeth. I let her drone on with several more enamel-removing yes ma'ams so I could get off the phone and curse myself for once again trying to be good. Are there any animal control officers out there that don't just pretend to love animals and have awful people skills? Minutes later, the Ridgeford Police Department got a call. The chief's receptionist sent the call from Brittany to Camp House. With his thumb over the mic, Camp House chuckled and looked over at K-9 Officer Tatum, who had an obvious crush on Brittany Nostalgia. "Mrs. Warenos needs an officer to find and locate a wounded animal for euthanasia," Camp House said as he sideways glanced over at Officer Tatum. Officer Tatum perked up. "Me and Fentanyl could go do the deed," he said as he stood up from his cubicle to go get his trusty cop dog. K-9 Officer Tatum and his dog Fentanyl arrived at the scene. Brittany was there with a trustee, who was wearing an orange jumpsuit with a Frozen t-shirt pulled over it that he had gotten out of the FOP building dumpster. "We have searched the path thoroughly, and we haven't been able to locate the poor injured animal. Do you mind assisting us, officer?" Brittany asked Officer Tatum, trying to sound extra European and smart. Tatum blushed and tried to hide a big peachy smile, then unleashed his dog. "Find him, Fen-Fen." Fentanyl sniffed along the ground quickly, and less than 30 seconds later, they all heard a squeal. Fen-Fen obediently stepped back and pointed. Officer Tatum called his sidekick Fentanyl to him and leashed him back up, patting him on the head gently in praise. "Thank you, Tatum," Brittany said in a chirpy voice. Officer Tatum and his dog left back on the road to patrol. Animal located, Brittany ordered the trustee to go fetch the euthanasia needle while she bent down at the poor animal and cooed. "We'll have you feeling better in a minute, bub. Don't you worry," she said as he tried to poke his eyeball back in her face and stroked his bloody chin. As her hand and needle approached to ease the poor dying animal's suffering, the groundhog reared up, swiped the paw out, and broke the spike off the syringe with a claw, and glared at Brittany with his one googly left eye. His other eye was popped out of his head and swayed gently underneath like a spaghetti string off his face. The animal control officer picked up a heavy stick and bopped him on the head. "We're here to help," said Brittany at the animal angrily. Needle broken, Brittany Nostalgia raised a log up to humanely bash the groundhog to death on its head with a stick. The trustee stopped Brittany. "I got a better idea, ma'am." He had seen such violence in his family like that before, and he didn't want to today. They had walked by an abandoned homeless camp in the woods, and he had a hunch. Raking the leaves of the camp around, he found a couple of dirty needles. He picked both of them up and went to the truck, knowing at least one probably still halfway worked. He looked behind the seats in the animal control pickup. Brake fluid. That should work. Functional yet dull syringe in hand and the chemicals to put down the hog. He walked confidently back to the scene. "Good idea, hun," Brittany said as she smiled at her help. "Yep, brake fluid should do the trick." She pulled 50 units up in the needle from some she poured in the bottle cap and plucked at the needle to make sure there was no air. From the altercation with the wounded animal before, Brittany was trembling. "Why don't you let me do that?" said the trustee. "Oh," said Brittany, "did you take some nursing in your youth?" "Sure," said the trustee, and took the syringe from his boss to perform the phlebotomy. "Spread open your legs," the trustee said plainly to the animal. Brittany obeyed and yanked her lower torso open with both hands. Finding a vein, he poked through the tough hide and drew back. He slowly pushed the plunger in once he saw red. "Ree!" the groundhog cried and flailed around in a circle in the leaves. While Brittany was poking at the belly of the poor animal with a stick while it squirmed, the trustee shoved the used syringe up his ass to take back to sell at the regional jail. It could fetch him up to 3 nollywoppers and 2 receptive butt fucks from a punk in prison, with perhaps some honey buns and ramen noodles extra on the side. Animal still flailing, Brittany Nostalgia grabbed her stick up again and smashed it hard against the animal's head. The groundhog flopped off to the side, and blood oozed out of the empty eye socket, with her eyeball dangling down. It gasped and patted with both front claws at a large whelp which began to form on the inside of their lower leg. "Damn it, I missed. Normally, I can hit a vein on a pinky, but this here rodent has lost a lot of blood and was twitching way too hard." The trustee shifted to the side a few times and squatted up and down twice so the contraband needle made its way firmly and further up inside his butthole. "Here, let me try again. I don't want it forever to be told that I ever missed a vein. We can explode his heart by injecting an air bubble." He pulled the other syringe out of his pocket and pulled the plunger back to draw in 5.5 cc's of fall Richford air. "Wonderful idea," Brittany said. Spreading her legs apart again, she positioned for the trustee's jab. The inmate found his mark this time and poked his dirty needle and squirted inside the hog. "Ree!" the groundhog cried with an extra loud ree. But alas, the poor animal, even with 0.5 cc's of air bubbles coursing through his veins, lay down and panted, still alive, and thrashed against the ground. Brittany Nostalgia sighed and spoke as if there were a crowd around. "We here at the Ridgeford Animal Control always try to ease every wounded animal's suffering." She looked sternly at the poor groundhog and screamed, "You should have died already!" Then, performing the sign of the cross, she reached around for a rock. It was the mountains, and there were many. Picking up a large 10-pound one, she shifted it till she found the sharpest part. She fumbled that end around and down in her hands and raised the crag up and positioned the boulder above her head to ease the animal's suffering with one of her favorite euthanasia techniques. Watching the hog closely for movements, she poised her uplifted arms to strike. The air bubble had finally reached the heart of the dying rodent, and blood began to spurt from its eye socket about in the breeze as its little groundhog heart beat extra hard and exploded in its chest, blood splattering all over Brittany. She brought the rock down on the suffering groundhog and smashed her brains and skull all over the forest floor. Blood was all over Brittany's face. She licked her lips and slurped. She pursed her lips out and let the air in and out of her mouth like she was tasting a fine wine. "We're definitely near the river," the Brit hog down by the river said as she kneeled. You can tell by the strange taste in this young groundhog's blood. If that test come back and there's no rabies, we can blame the polluted ways of old and chemicals in the earth for the groundhog's odd, aggressive behavior. Smiling, she stood up and brushed the dirt and leaves off her knees. As they were walking back to the animal control mobile, which looked more like a clean suburban pickup truck with a dirty hound dog box, Brittany noticed a trustee looking at cigarette butts on the ground. "Go ahead," she said as she fumbled in her pocket and tossed him a lighter. The trustee lit one of them up, inhaled deeply and held the smoke in like pot or meth. They both got inside the truck and drove off while sharing a joint. "Another successful and humane death of the animal for the Ridgeford Animal Control," Miss Werno said, grinning at her partner. "Indeed, Brittany Nostalgia," said the trustee. "You and I have bonded over this well-performed task. You may now call me Brit Nasty," said the European officer haughtily. "You can smell the love. Oh, and Brit Nasty," said the trustee with his head tilted off to the side, looking at her thoughtfully and twirling his fingers around in his face. Brittany understood and looked in the mirror. There were flecks of blood all over her, and a few large splotches on the side of her neck like red pearls. She licked all over her face again, as far as her tongue could to savor the taste. Taking a burgundy-painted index finger, Brit Nasty swiped the dots off her neck and licked them, then rubbed the rest of the small flecks into her face and skin like liquid rouge. She put her head down pensively and sighed as she wiped off her right hand on her upper chest. Proud of her work that day and satisfied with her career choice, Brit Nasty rapped proud twice on the armor breastplate she knew she had to wear every day and smiled, joyful that she and her proud name were so beloved in that small town where she worked. Thank you.